When he was an adolescent boy, his mother said of him, "Davy is a well-meanin' critter, but uncommon weak-minded." His mother was a poor judge of her son. Her son Davy was to become David Hume, the sharpest intellect in the history of British philosophy, and not what you would call weak-minded. But as for being a well-meanin' critter, her son Davy was far from being well-meaning. He was the most mercilessly destructive of all the British empiricists, and he took a fiendish delight in annihilating the claims of philosophy, shocking the upholders of religion, and undermining the validity of scientific laws and the entire Enlightenment belief in progress. His life in its outward details is uneventful. Hume was born in Edinburgh in Scotland in 1711. He grew up in genteel poverty at the Hume family estate called Ninewells in the Scottish lowlands, a few miles from the English border. Ninewells is described by a recent biographer of Hume as the pleasantest place imaginable, standing on a hill overlooking the rushing waters of the Whitewater River in a magnificent landscape of distant mountains. Hume attended the University of Edinburgh for 3 or 4 years, leaving before he was 16 years old without taking a degree. At first he tried to do what his family wished him to do, and he began to study to become a lawyer. But he tells us in his autobiography, while his family thought he was reading law books, he was secretly devouring philosophy. After 3 years, he reports that there opened up to me a new scene of thought, which was so exciting that it made him want to give up everything else and devote himself entirely to it. The law now appeared nauseous to him. As a result, he promptly abandoned the study of law and gave up the financial security it could have given him. What had he seen? What was this new scene of thought which led him to feel that he was the master, conqueror, and destroyer of all past philosophy? The breakthrough which Hume the empiricist had was this: what if all our scientific knowledge is not knowledge at all, and has no certainty, and has no way of being proved to be certain, but is only based upon our feelings that what the senses give us is true? But then all the achievements of the great new sciences of astronomy, physics, chemistry, physiology, all these marvels of the age of the Enlightenment bite the dust. They are nothing but sentiments, feelings, that what we perceive over and over again in orderly fashion is true. Hume's exciting new philosophic outlook was based upon the empiricism of Locke and Berkeley, who defended sense perception and argued that true knowledge comes only from sense perception and is tested by it. But Hume began to move toward the frightening thought that if the empiricists are right, then our best knowledge, scientific laws, are nothing but sense perceptions which our feelings lead us to believe in. Therefore, it is doubtful that we have any knowledge at all. We have only sense perceptions, observations, plus feelings. Here in these thoughts of the young Hume was a radical, extreme skepticism, an extreme form of doubting the possibility that certainty in knowledge is attainable. Descartes' skepticism looks puny, weak, timid by comparison with this. Descartes had planned and found a foundation for knowledge that would establish its certainty. Hume seems to be planning to destroy any possible foundation that could establish the certainty of knowledge. Is it any wonder that after the first flush of excitement, the first gratification of feeling that he was the young David Hume slaying the Goliath of all science, philosophy, and theology, that he panicked, that he became overcome by anxiety? The bottom of everything dropped out for him. In the fall of 1729, he had a severe nervous breakdown, which lasted for the next 5 years, with physical symptoms and feelings of depression and weakness. He struggled to read and to continue to write, and he tells us that he used up great stacks of paper, but he complains that he was not able to follow through any train of thought or to write the polished prose that he demanded of himself. I had no hopes, he complains, of delivering my opinions with such elegance and neatness as to draw to me the attention of the world. This was what Hume always wanted. After 5 years of this, Hume decided to give up philosophy, but in a few months he decided that action might be a cure, and he left home and went to La Flèche in France, 150 miles southeast of Paris. That was the location of Descartes' old Jesuit college, you recall, a fact which Hume pointedly ignored. There Hume holed up in a small apartment on a country estate and made use of the college library. At the end of 3 years of intensive writing, his first and greatest book, the Treatise of Human Nature, was almost completed in 1737. He returned to London, edited the manuscript, and arranged for the treatise to be published. He had expected the treatise to be hailed immediately as a philosophic masterpiece, but he was bitterly disappointed. The reviews of the book were unfavorable. Few people seemed to have read it. Fewer still seemed to have understood it. Hume said of the book, it fell dead born from the press. Hume next tried to get a professorship at the University of Edinburgh, but he was turned down on religious grounds because of his open mocking of churchgoers and because of his contempt for religious belief. Some years later, the University of Glasgow turned him down for the same reason. Hume was never to become a university professor, but he supported himself first as a tutor and later as secretary to various wealthy and influential persons, including the British ambassador to France. He was finally appointed as an Under-Secretary of State. As a mature man, Hume was described in this way. His face was broad and fat, his mouth wide and without any other expression than that of imbecility. His eyes were vacant and spiritless, and the corpulence of his whole person was far better fitted to communicate the idea of a turtle-eating alderman than that of a refined philosopher. His speech in English was rendered ridiculous by the broadest Scotch accent, and his French was, if possible, still more laughable, so that wisdom never before disguised herself in so uncouth a garb. Other uncomplimentary remarks were made by the historian Gibbon about Hume. Gibbon said he was the fattest pig in the sty. Despite these unflattering descriptions, Hume became a celebrity, a well-established literary figure as an historian and as a philosopher. When Hume went back to France as secretary to the British ambassador, he was hailed in Paris as a huge success. He had fulfilled what he said was his ruling passion, the love of literary fame. He had at last accomplished what in the depths of his early depression and nervous breakdown he thought he would never be able to do, and that is to draw to myself the attention of the world. Now to take a closer look at Hume's philosophy and the way in which his wrecking ball will work. In the introduction to the Treatise of Human Nature, he says his purpose is to study the science of man and to explain the principles of human nature. Like Newton, he is going to reduce the science of man, as Newton reduced mechanics, to a few simple principles. But why is he going to do this? It is because all other sciences are based upon the science of man. Therefore, to study the science of man, the science of human nature, is really to study the foundation of all human knowledge. What Hume intends to do is to ask, with regard to all our knowledge, 1, how do you know? What is the origin of your knowledge? And 2, what are the limits of human knowledge? These are the questions which empiricism raises, and Hume will push them consistently and relentlessly. And he already knows what he will show, that we have no knowledge but only beliefs of sense perception which we feel are true. Why did Hume begin his treatise with a search for the foundations of human knowledge? His purpose in asking what are the foundations of all knowledge is to show that there is only one foundation consisting of one kind of knowledge, and that is knowledge by sense perception. His purpose is destructive. It is to destroy the age-old philosophic belief that there are two kinds of knowledge, that one is the ordinary lower-level knowledge of the sensible world, the world of flux, which Plato called the world of true opinion. Descartes called this lower type of knowledge the confused ideas of the senses. For both Plato and Descartes, there is a superior level of knowledge which has reason as its source and which provides certainty to knowledge. Plato used the divided line of knowledge and the imagery of ascent and of a ladder of knowledge by which we climb to a superior type of truth which is gained by the knowledge of the eternal forms of the intelligible world. Descartes called this superior type of knowledge rational truth, consisting of our clear and distinct ideas. Both Plato and Descartes argued from the assumption that there are these two types of knowledge, that above ordinary knowledge by sense perception, there is a superior kind of knowledge whose source is in human reason, and that this superior knowledge enables us to know truth about reality, and so to have a metaphysics, a theory which provides knowledge about the nature of reality. We have seen Plato's metaphysics, his theory of reality as consisting of the eternal forms. We have seen Descartes' metaphysics, his theory of reality as consisting of mental and physical substances. Enter Hume. He denies that there are two kinds of knowledge. The notion that there is a superior kind of knowledge that philosophers can reach by reason, knowledge of the nature of reality, metaphysical knowledge. This notion, he says, is completely false, a total illusion. Philosophers who foist this notion upon a gullible public are guilty of fraud and deceit. Metaphysics, such as that of Plato or of St. Thomas or of Descartes, is the product, says Hume, of rash arrogance, lofty pretensions, and superstitious credulity on the part of those who believe them. We can never know the nature of ultimate reality, Hume argues. Those philosophers who claim to know the nature of ultimate reality are knaves and fools. They are fools because they do not understand that this is a kind of knowledge that human beings can never have. We are limited in what we can know to sense perception. And they are knaves insofar as they persuade us to follow them in their illusory, false philosophy. The fact is, says Hume, that we shall never know what are the causes of the sense perceptions that we have, what are the true qualities of things in the world, and why things are as they are. We shall never know the nature and the purpose or plan of the world. Reason can never discover this. Hume says these ultimate springs and principles are totally shut up from human curiosity and inquiry. Human understanding is limited, and the things that metaphysics seeks to know, we can never know. There is only one kind of knowledge, and that is knowledge by sense perception, by sensory experience. Here, Hume is stating the bedrock principle of all empiricism, that the only legitimate source and test of knowledge is by sense perception. And with this principle, as we have seen, empiricism attacks all rationalism, all metaphysics, all philosophic systems, all master builders such as Plato and St. Thomas and Descartes. Now, what does Hume have to offer about sense perception, which, according to him, is the only source of knowledge that we have, and to which all that human beings can ever know is forever limited? The contents of consciousness in general he calls perceptions. You remember that Descartes called them ideas. Hume divides perceptions into impressions and ideas. Impressions are our immediate sensations, passions, and emotions, the immediate data of seeing, touching, hearing, desiring, loving, hating. Ideas are copies or faint images of impressions, such as we have in thinking about our impressions or recalling any of our immediate impressions. For example, if you look at the room you're in, you have an impression of it. Sensations of its size, its furnishings, the color of the walls, the windows, the ticking of the clockwork. Hume looks at his room and he says in his book, "When I shut my eyes and think of my chamber, the ideas I form are exact representations of the impressions I felt, nor is there any circumstance of the one which is not in the other. Ideas and impressions appear always to correspond to each other. Hume goes on to say that the difference between impressions and ideas is in the greater force and liveliness of impressions, our immediate impressions. Impressions, he says, enter our consciousness with more force and violence. By contrast, ideas are only images of our impressions, which occur in our thinking, reasoning, and remembering. Hume goes on to distinguish between simple and complex impressions, and the simple and complex ideas which are images of them. My perception of red, as in the color of this book, is a simple impression, and my recollection of this red color is a simple idea. But I can stand on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington at night and look at the brilliantly illuminated Capitol building in the distance. This is an impression too, but a very complex one, consisting of many impressions of darkness and lights, blackness and yellow glows of lamps, white marble, grayish in shadows. It is a complex impression, and my recollection of it is a complex idea. We can show, says Hume, that every one of my simple ideas of the Capitol has a simple impression which it resembles. Hume is making an important empiricist argument here, that we cannot know anything which we have not had a prior impression of in sensory experience. The rule holds, says Hume, for all our simple impressions, that every simple idea has a simple impression which precedes it, and every simple impression has a correspondent idea. The fundamental principle that Hume sees that he has established is this: all our simple ideas in their first appearance are derived from simple impressions which are correspondent to them, he says, and which they exactly represent. How is Hume going to use this seemingly innocent account of our experience as consisting of impressions and ideas? How is he going to use his claim that every idea has a corresponding impression from which it arises? He will use it dramatically and devastatingly to analyze and demolish a number of important philosophic ideas. It is his most powerful wrecking ball. All he needs to do is to ask, from what impression does this idea come? If from no impression, then the idea is worthless. So with regard to the idea of substance, used by St. Thomas Aquinas, used by the scholastic philosophers of the Middle Ages, used by Descartes. From what impressions, Hume asks them, does your idea of substance arise? Their answer can only be from impressions of qualities we experience, qualities of size, shape, color, qualities that we can touch and see and smell. And so we cannot say that substances exist. We can know that something exists only if we have an impression of it, only if we have sensory experience of it. And so Hume deflates the claim that substances exist. He destroys the claim by showing that we have no impressions of physical substances. All we have knowledge of is our impressions of various qualities. Hume goes on to say, philosophers have been using empty, meaningless words like physical substance, mental substance, mind, self, as if they actually referred to things which exist. And they do not. 20th century linguistic philosophers have echoed Hume's view. On analysis, says Hume, we find that there are no impressions of any of these substances. We have impressions only of the qualities we experience. And so these words, substance, mind, self, have no meaning since they come from no impression. And so Hume is able to use his rule that all ideas arise from impressions to which they correspond, in order to demolish all such ideas as these. His rule is simple and powerful. Where there is no impression, there is no idea. No impression, the idea is meaningless. We can now move on to Hume's theory of the association of ideas. Hume has presented a view of our experience as made up of atomic elements, of distinct separable impressions and ideas, each a little atom, as it were, constituting our experience. This atomistic view of experience began with the empiricist Locke and dominated the beginning of psychology in the 18th and also in the 19th century. Therefore, the task for the psychologist was to discover how these minute atoms of experience, these sensations or impressions that we have, are connected. What are the laws by which these atomic sensations or impressions are connected with one another? How do they become associated, as they said, into complex ideas, into the ideas of everyday experience and science? Theoretically, we could associate any simple idea with any other simple idea. But, says Hume, in the ordinary course of conversation or in scientific discussion, we find that our ideas do not follow one another by chance. They do not follow one another helter-skelter or at our will. We find instead that the same simple ideas lead regularly into the same complex ideas. And so, Hume goes on, there must be some universal principles in our thinking, we would say some psychological principles, which operate in us, not with necessity, but nevertheless as a force or impulse to associate ideas in certain ways. Hume describes this impulse as a gentle force which commonly prevails. The association of our ideas, he says, is based upon three qualities, which tend to lead the mind from one idea to another, to connect or associate one idea with another. These three qualities are the basis of the three laws of the association of ideas. The first law is that ideas are associated or connected by their resemblance, by the resemblance between ideas. So, our minds easily run from one idea to another that resembles it. Hume gives us an example, namely that a picture easily leads our thought to the original of which the picture was taken. We could say that a picture of former President Nixon leads our thoughts to our ideas of him. The second law by which we associate or connect one idea with another is by contiguity, one idea being close to or adjacent to another in space or in time. Our minds tend to associate one idea with another that is physically adjoining it, contiguous with it. Hume gives as an example that mentioning one apartment in an apartment building naturally leads us to think about the others. The third law of the association of ideas is by cause and effect. Our minds, he says, seem impelled to associate a cause with the effect that it brings about. For example, Hume says, if we think of a wound to the body, we can scarcely keep ourselves from reflecting on the pain which follows it. The idea of the wound leads us by this law of association of ideas to the idea of the effect of the wound, namely the resulting pain. These three laws of association of ideas, by which our thinking is naturally moved, impelled from one idea to another, which resembles it, or which is next to it, or which is its effect. These three laws characterize, he says, all our mental operations, including all our reasoning, and specifically they characterize our scientific reasoning. Of all the three laws of association of ideas, the association or connection of ideas by cause and effect, says Hume, is the most powerful connection between our ideas. Is this just an innocent set of laws, merely a scholar's picky little distinctions? You know Hume better than to believe that he is wasting time on harmless academic niceties or picky distinctions. The laws of association of ideas are part of his wrecking ball empiricist strategy, and he is now going to use the third law of association of ideas by cause and effect in order to destroy the claim that we can have scientific knowledge that certain causes necessarily produce certain effects. Watch where his strategy has brought you so far. He has just said that our atomic ideas, which correspond to our impressions, are connected or associated by 3 laws of association, which are a gentle force leading us to associate one idea with another. These 3 laws pertain to all our thinking, thus also and especially to our scientific thinking. He has also taken you onto another step in his strategy. Of the 3 laws of association, the one that gives the most powerful impulse to connect one idea with another is by cause and effect. Now for the next step. Hume claims that anything we can say about objects, about matters of fact, beyond talking about our immediate impressions of what we see and touch, must be based upon the cause-effect relationship. How did this happen? What is the cause? All our reasoning about matter of fact, says Hume, is causal. And of course, all the laws of science are causal laws of nature. But what has Hume made you agree to? Has he not made you agree that scientific knowledge is nothing but ideas from sense impressions which we associate by the laws of association of ideas? Is scientific knowledge, then, nothing but ideas that the laws of human psychology associates together as cause and effect? Are the causal laws of astronomy, the laws of mechanics and of gravity and of the movement of gases, are these laws merely expressions of our psychology of associating ideas by cause and effect? Hume has led you to this outcome. But if this is so, then we have no scientific knowledge whatsoever. We have, in place of scientific knowledge, only feelings of compulsion, of a gentle force that makes us feel that our ideas are connected by cause and effect. In that case, physics is nothing but our own psychology and is worthless as knowledge. And the entire build-up of knowledge of causal laws of nature since Copernicus, the scientific laws which were the pride and hope of the Enlightenment, are smashed by Hume's empiricist wrecking ball. These laws become nothing but psychological associations of ideas. Hume's most original contribution to philosophy and his greatest influence is in what he has to say on the cause-effect relationship. It is his major work of destruction. We turn to this at the next time.
Pre-recorded in the studios of the Maryland Center for Public Broadcasting.